talk about two projects. One will be a project combined with layers of work there that has to do with helping professionals and specifically health professionals. And we have a team with our usual suspects, colleagues from the University of Salford, and less usual suspects, colleagues from the Royal. Jane, I will never name the hospital fully. It has a very long name. So, from Liverpool University Foundation Trust, they manage it. So we'll start with that. We'll continue with thinking about mothers and motherhood, and with Lena Simmons, right? So if I get us started with the first project, we're looking at supporting the well-being of helping professionals through creative interventions, recommendations and applications. So the recommendations come from work we have done with funding from the Wellcome Trust, which I'm going to introduce briefly. That first piece, that was a foundation piece, was a systematic review and meta-analysis. We'll talk about the implementation of the recommendations in the Liverpool NHS Trust, and we'll name some of the future research we're planning. So this foundational piece was completed by Suprita et al., Sean Liverpool, Anir Kumar Baradawa, who was our PPIE, or lived experience expert, and me in a supervisory role. And we did a synthesis of a large number of studies. We had an update recently of 49 studies across the world, and anything that had to do with arts, arts interventions, any creative interventions were included. It had 17 were randomized trials, randomized controlled trials, and 5 were non-randomized trials. We had almost half of the studies refer to nurses, which is, sort of, we didn't aim for the health professionals. We looked at social workers, teachers, doctors, any allied health professionals, the whole range of carers. But because there were a lot of studies that took place in hospitals, we had a healthcare context. Nurses, being a large workforce, became sort of almost half of our population there. We had a lot of studies that were conducted focusing on music, which is not, I guess, unusual for those who know the literature in arts and arts therapies, where we have traditionally a bit more active researchers in the music field. So Nisa mentioned the tiered approach. That was an interesting finding, that we sort of overlaid on tiered approach to psychological provision. We found that there were a large number of studies that were involved passive engagement with the arts. So music was played in the corridors, or while they were in operating theatres. There were art installations and corridors. So this is sort of, and the environment was artistically, sort of decorated, creating an atmosphere. There were also opportunities for people to engage more actively in Tier 1+, where we had people who were invited to do creative writing, body relaxation, sort of one-off engagement with the art form. So that was tier 1 and tier 1 plus. And then tier 2 was very much about participation in a more structured way. We had storytelling over several sessions. We had regular dance after work. There wasn't an intention for therapy as such, or potentially some therapeutic outcomes, but it was sort of a much more committed engagement with the art form. And then we have tier 3, which was very much a therapy intervention for those who were burnout, those who needed support, those who were seeking therapy, or the managers and the environment thought it was a good idea to be referred to a group with a consistent ongoing participation and therapy contract. So that was tier 3. So this is what we found. We also looked at that's a lot of Suprita's work on the meta-analysis, where we had large positive effects for anxiety and stress and organizational factors, and moderate positive effects for burnout and depression. And this is work that we are currently preparing for publication. It has been submitted to the Wellcome Trust as a full report, and you have no QR codes, whatsoever. But at the end of that report, you'll find some of this information on the Wellcome Trust under the more generic link, and under the Research Center for Arts and Wellbeing, we have a link to that summary of the published report from the Wellcome Trust. We have a list of recommendations for policymakers, employers, and researchers. These recommendations included things like for policymakers, it's important to think about this tiered approach. Is this useful? We cannot expect that the arts will do its panacea and will do everything. We need to think about how the provision is offered, and this provision cannot be targeting individuals necessarily. We need to think about environments, we need to think about groups, as well as supporting and empowering people who are in need. So that sort of wider context and different levels of support is important. We need to be thinking about participatory arts engagement both short-term and long-term, and think about culturally sensitive arts-based resource that people can access easily on their own time if they need to as well, and sort of education around self-care. So similarly, thinking about employers with a list of recommendations and researchers that we took on board. We said, okay, these are useful recommendations. We have the foundation. We have a sense of what the literature is telling us. How can we put that in practice? So this is how we put it in practice. So I'm going to invite Jane to join us. Jane Hutton, she's heading the psychological services in the trust that I can never pronounce, the Liverpool
University Hospitals Foundation Trust.
Jane, take over from me and present it properly.
Thank you, Vicky. So I'm here to give a bit of context to the project. And first of all, just to name the immense amount of stress the healthcare workers are under, which was exacerbated but not created by the COVID pandemic. So for example, in this large international study, a majority of healthcare workers screened positive for burnout, as well as significant numbers experiencing anxiety or depression, especially those in frontline patient-facing roles. There was an upsurge in support during the pandemic. So the World Health Organization advice that Vicky already mentioned. There was a real discourse around a heroic role for health professionals that was certainly problematic. It gets you so far to have people on the doorsteps clapping for you, but it doesn't help with the suffering that's caused from working on the front line. And there are a wide range of different resources for support that were implemented online and by phone, of course not in person at that point. individually or by groups, specialist kinds of support, and also things that didn't involve other people at all, meditation or CBT-based apps for sleep, for example. So a real menu of interventions. Why would creative interventions be included here? And certainly opportunities for recovery and restoration. Also, I thought that as it's often non-verbal and different from the normal forms of interaction in everyday clinical life, that may feel easier and safer to fully engage in, especially in a group in front of peers. Very much needed support, with of course an impact not only on the individual receiving the support, but also through supporting them to continue to work safely in an engaged way, benefits for the immediate service they work in and also the wider organisation. But there's not much out there. Things are growing, but evidence-based creative interventions for NHS staff are still limited. So I chose to use an image of the old Royal Liverpool Hospital, because one of the various stresses that the organisation has been under has been the move into the new hospital, which is beautiful, but we know that moving house is one of the most stressful things we can do, and that is at least as true for moving hospitals. So Liverpool is a growing city with very high levels of deprivation and also very high levels of physical and mental health, morbidity and multimorbidity. Our trust is the only general hospital trust in the city. We also have the specialist ones, Alderhay for children, the women's and Walton for neuro, but we do everything else. It serves the population of Merseyside, and it also reaches out for some specialisms into the wider region. And it's also one of the largest employers in the region. And an additional stress for us currently is under the Care Quality Commission. We are looking to get out of special measures. We are on track for that, but as I'm sure you can imagine, on top of everything else, that's a very significant stress. Prior to the pandemic, we had very close to zero staff support. There was a contracted out employee assistance programme and nothing else. We established a staff support psychological service during the first wave of COVID, initially on zero resource, although now funded. About 800 referrals a year. Half of them we refer outwards, half of them we support with psychology or counselling in-house. We offer a range of approaches: CBT, acceptance and commitment therapy, solution-focused therapy, eye movement, desensitisation reprocessing, and person-centred therapy. We can tailor that to individual needs, but we don't do any creative therapies in-house. What we do works. We look at anxiety, depression outcome as our measures. We also look at supporting people to get back to work. But it's never good to stand still. We're always looking for new interventions that are effective and that widen the range we can offer. Hence, over to Joanna.
Thank you. So let me, the next slide. Oh, how do I do that? Next slide. No, not that one.
Oh, sorry, I missed that bit.
You missed that one. Well, yeah, I thought that was just a quote from. Is it quote from service? You have been fantastic. You've provided me with some really useful strategies which I can use on a daily basis to help myself. I feel that our sessions have helped me to realize that I can not only do so much to help others and that I must care for myself as a priority. That's a lovely quote from Jane's service, from the treatment that was received. But as Jane said, there is no creative approaches in the service offered for staff. So here we came as you know, we've created Arts for the Blues. So we thought it would be a great idea if we were able to introduce Arts for the Blues in Jane's service. Jane is looking after the staff and well-being of staff and provides psychological services for staff. So we thought it would be a great idea to do this. So here what we have are kind of very official aims and objectives. So the overall aim was to evaluate the multi-leveled evidence-based creative psychological intervention that has been adopted for the NHS clinical staff affected by COVID-19 pandemic. So out of the Arts for the Blues, we've created a sort of an adapted version. I will tell you a little bit more about in a moment. But the objective were really to adapt this Arts for the Blues intervention to the needs of the NHS staff. So that was number one. Number two, just see really if it's acceptable and is valuable to NHS staff. And number three, to see if the research methods, the recruitment strategy really is working in a Jane setting in the hospital. So for people, I'm sure everybody's heard of Arts for the Blues by now, but this is just a reminder of our original model. So the original model is 12 sessions, and I think the kind of key feature here are the key ingredients that are in the yellow, that came from the literature review. So you've got in the introductory section of the group work, you've got encouraging active engagement and learning skills. Then in the next stage, in building resources and sort of strengths, you've got developing relationships and expressing emotions. Then in the sort of next stage of group work, when we're addressing personal and group challenges, have processing at the deeper level and gaining understanding. And in the closing section, experimenting with different ways of being and integrating useful material. So now, what we did for staff, that's a really interesting transition. We actually changed the model slightly, really adjusting to the context of the hospital. So you've got the level one, are the interventions that were provided on the kind of a more drop-in level, and just a one of interventions that people can kind of come in and sample and quick change, feel better. Then on the level two, we've worked with teams and groups really to work on the relationships and strengthening the teams that we've got in the hospitals. And level three, that's the original Arts for the Blues, so as a therapy model. So that was kind of reserved for people perhaps who were off sick and needed a more kind of in-depth intervention. So starting with a sort of more wider organizational setting to sort of more in-depth therapeutic context. So the research methods that we used, so for the qualitative methods for all the levels, we used a brief evaluation form, what's worked, what didn't work, what was helpful, what wasn't. But then we also used the quantitative measures. So for all the levels, we used the moral distress thermometer, which is quite a simple measure. And then now for the level two, for the groups, we used the brief resilience coping scale and WHO-5 well-being measure. And for the level three, for the therapy intervention, we used the PTSD checklist, PCL5, and then anxiety measure and depression measure, PHQ-9 and GAD-7. So I think that's my, oh yes, that's my bit. And now Emma. Yeah.
Thank you. So I did what I consider to be the fun bit, where I went and did it with colleagues who I think are all here today. So there was quite a few therapists from different backgrounds, all creative arts therapists, delivering this at different hospitals, because there's a few hospitals out there in the trust. So these are the participants that we managed to engage with. You can see that overall we had 54 staff that came through the service we were providing. Level one there, you can see 34 came to the drop-in sessions. We had 16 coming to the team workshops, and 4, we had a lot of referrals actually pick up for the level 3. 4 were the ones that went through for the whole 12 sessions. So I'm just going to give you a bit of an overview really of those 3 different levels. So these levels map way back when Vicky was talking about systematic review onto that kind of tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 model. So the level 1 was these kind of drop-in, participatory, have a go at some kind of art space work. So the aim for these sessions was, tension release, maybe some prevention. The ingredients, as Joanna was just talking about, were very much about that encouraging active engagement, maybe learning a new skill, having a go at something new. And some of these examples we have here. So we had a lovely little art task, placing some washi tape over cards, colour it in, see what you get at the end, peeling it off. Nice little, we initially, I should say, when we planned it, said, we'll do 30-minute drop-in sessions. And we kept saying, we'll do 15-minute drop-in sessions. Take 5 minutes out of your day. So it went shorter and shorter and shorter. So these are lovely little 5-minute things that we could do. So again, here, a little sort of creative writing task. We had lots of text, so you could place a viewfinder over the text, see what words pop out for you, note them down, and arrange them in a way that might look like a poem or a creative sentence. And then we had some body-based work in there as well, which was tricky in the space. So we designed a sort of a meditation that was quite active with the body. So maybe, moving different body parts. And then participants were invited to perhaps make some marks on this body scan afterwards. So that was level 1. We had lots of activities that we offered. That was some examples. So some of the qualitative results from this level, the helpful things that people found was that it was a mental break from work. They could concentrate on something that was not ward-based, and they could maybe take some time to reflect. They found it quite fun. They lifted mood. That was some of the reports that we got. That release of tension, so that aim of releasing tension, that did come back through in the results. And learning something new as well was something that came through. What was unhelpful was that they didn't have enough time. So we feel very, very rushed to complete some of the tasks that perhaps we were offering them. They wanted to maybe do more. So moving on to level 2, the team workshops. Some of these team workshops were face-to-face, some of them were online. The aim here was, very much about teamwork, that resilience within the team well-being, perhaps some team building, boosting morale. These ingredients, again, that encouraging active engagement and learning something new, but now perhaps thinking more about expressing some emotions, maybe experimenting with perhaps different way of being, different roles in the team, how you'd like to be in the team, mapping onto that tier 2, as I was saying. So some examples of this work that we did, we used a 6-part story method from drama therapy. We had a drama therapist that was working with me. So perhaps introducing a new character that might be a fictional team member, and finding some kind of task for them to complete and how they might get over these obstacles to complete the task or not. Choosing images, something that you're drawn to today, using sand trays, choosing objects to represent strengths within the team, strengths you might want to develop, and what resources you might need, and using guided meditation as well. So we always had that kind of grounding meditation within all the team workshops that we ran. Oh, and when we were face-to-face, we were able to do, it didn't look like this is a stock image, but we were able to do a lovely wall activity with sort of connecting with a face you knew, connect with a face you might like to get to know better, which created some interesting conversations. So what was helpful about this from the qualitative results were that people were able to build team relationships and learn things about team members, perhaps some team bonding as well. There were personal benefits as well, so not just for the team, some grounding, relaxation, time to reflect and ground myself, as you can see here in the quotes. And benefits for the team, thinking about having that space to reflect together on the needs and strengths of the team and sharing those values for the future, perhaps. What was unhelpful was that it was a bit awkward at work, sort of, particularly because I should say, I think this particular quote came from when we turned up and there was no room and we did it in the office. They said it was a bit awkward actually, which is fair enough, but the rest of the quote talks about how they got into it eventually. So level 3, I'm very quickly taking to level 3, which is a much more in-depth. So the Arts for the Blues model that Joanna was showing you, the 12 sessions, this was very much, the full 12 sessions were delivered online. So, moving right through from those ingredients at the beginning, learning new skills and active engagement, right through to, integrating useful material this was very much aimed at staff who were off sick and were unable to get back into work through stress and various different illnesses. Some of the examples of the activities that were done, as I say, this was all online, so these are screenshots. So things like, you know, creative ways of making group agreements, placing yourself on the Arts for the Blues map, windows of tolerance using you know, images for this, looking at creating mandalas and looking at mindful movement and connection to the somatosensory cortex. And things that were helpful from level 3 were that they liked that it was manualised, they liked that there were specific things that they would focus on each week. They loved the arts-based methods. There was a lot from the data. They were saying that, you know, they really appreciated that time to be creative and to explore their own creativity. The support from others, they really appreciated being in a group and being able to see that others were in similar positions and to learn from each other and have that support. And the personal benefits of, as this person says here, developing a sense of self, agency and autonomy, and flourish and living with hope. And the unhelpful thing about level 3 was really related to the fact that it was online, so sort of sitting in an armchair and it being quite tricky with laptops and things like that. So this is just, we've actually only got the slide from the level 1, so this is some examples from work, and I'll read this little poem that someone wrote in 5 minutes. The eyes of nature glisten in the rain, emulating the desires of the moon. The silent smile of photographs of life. Through love and devotion, wake the secret desires of life. Which is a lovely poem, and we had lots of poems that came up from the drop-in session, so lots of lovely work. And I'm going to pass over to Vicky to discuss the quantitative results.
So that was mainly a qualitative piece. We're trying to figure out whether the recommendations we found out from the systematic review and the meta-analysis could be used. So the quantitative results are very indicative of whether there was an appropriate direction of travel, whether the methods were good methods to use to a larger study. We did find significant differences before and after. We didn't have a control group, so we were sort of limitations in terms of making any arguments or claims around effectiveness for the intervention. But we have some indication of direction of travel. We did have the yellow things on the screen as the results from that were statistically significant. So you see we had changes in this group for consistently with a moral distress thermometer, and certainly we found there were differences that were appearing already with, on well-being and resilience. The positive changes were happening in all levels, but of course when we're talking about level 3, we only have 4 participants, so we cannot really make any claims whatsoever, and I think with extending the sample, we potentially can make more claims. It was a difficult group to recruit. That's, you know, we put a lot of effort, we put a lot of time in trying to recruit participants. When people engaged, they engaged really well and really felt, you know, sort of in our experience that there was a lot of good stuff that they were getting. So we saw some of the quantitative methods, they seem to be fitting, but we still need to be thinking about, for example, what's the primary outcome, as you said there. We're trying to figure out what of all of that would be the main focus of our attention for a larger study. We started thinking we need to think about specific professions, because we became quite wide. It was nurses, it was care staff, it was any clinical staff was part of our sample. And we needed to think about specific contexts, units or departments in a hospital to be able to see change in this organizational context as well. In terms of future research, we have secured funding from the Health Education England to look at doctors in training. Those from the UK will be familiar how much challenging experiences they have at the moment. So we had great support from psychiatrist Roselle Rackinson, who has invested interest in supporting also the well-being of doctors in training. And so we're going to start that in August, very much within level 2. So, a cross between 1 and 2 in terms of self-care, educative, psychoeducation intervention. So we'll tell you more when we define the intervention and adapt what we have, what we learn from this. And we're also preparing a study with mental health staff for research for patient benefit, which I don't know whether we have NIHR colleagues here. Will be knocking on your door very soon to discuss this application further. So that's where we are with this.